What is Passover and unleavened bread? How do we memorialize them? Are they just Old Testament holidays that don't apply to new, grafted-in believers in Messiah today? Absolutely not. Yahweh's holy days are for everyone who desires to be in covenant with Him, whether Jew or Greek, male or female. If you call Yahweh your God and Yeshua Jesus your Messiah, then these days are 100% for your memorialization and participation. So let's learn all about them, and more importantly, let's get doing them. The first time we see Yahweh's Passover being implemented as one of Israel's holy feast days is first recorded during the events of Israel's exodus out of Egypt. The origination of the Feast of Unleavened Bread will be touched on in this brief video, so keep an eye out for it. For the most part, I'm going to be reading out of my favorite version, the Legacy Standard Bible, and from time to time, I'll also pull from my favorite Septuagint version, the Lexham English Septuagint. Exodus 12, verse 1-6 says, "Now Yahweh said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, This month shall be the beginning of months for you. It is to be the first month of the year to you. Speak to all the congregation of Israel, saying, On the 10th of this month, they are each one to take a lamb for themselves, according to their fathers' households, a lamb for each household. Now if the household is too small for a lamb, then he and his neighbor nearest to his house are to take one according to the number of persons in them, according to what each man should eat. You are to apportion the lamb. Your lamb shall be a male, without blemish, a year old. You may take it from the sheep or from the goats. And you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. Then the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall slaughter it at twilight." The first verse of chapter 12 shows Yahweh communicating the importance of Passover being celebrated in what is to be the first month of the start of their calendar year. On the 10th day of month 1, the congregation of Israel, which includes you, the in-covenant viewer, were to select an unblemished 1-year-old male lamb or goat for themselves, or for their households, and keep it with them from the 10th until the 14th at twilight, which is when the Passover lamb or goat was to be slaughtered for the meal. Now, of course, many of us aren't living within an agricultural context, and so the practicality of the instruction would have you select your lamb or goat meat from a butcher's or a grocery store, and have it set aside for consumption by the 14th at twilight. Of course, if you are someone who has experienced slaughtering animals in a humane way, and have the type of property that can allow for such slaughtering, then this instruction can certainly apply to you. The text does not say that you need to be a priest, or that it needs to be done at a temple. I'll expound on this assertion a little later. The Lexham English Septuagint translates the latter end of verse 6 as, "And it shall be kept by you till the 14th of this month, and all the multitude of the congregation of the children of Israel shall kill it toward evening." Just to clarify, let's pull up a dictionary definition for these two words. Twilight is defined as the light from the sky between full night and sunrise, or between sunset and full night, produced by diffusion of sunlight through the atmosphere and its dust. Evening is defined as the latter part and close of the day and early part of the night. A lot of people struggle with the timing as recorded in Exodus pertaining to when the Passover should be slaughtered and cooked. The Book of Jubilees provides much needed insight on the particulars for the timing of this meal preparation. Jubilees 49:10-12 says, "Let the children of Israel come and observe the Passover on the day of its fixed time, on the 14th day of the first month, between the evenings, from the third part of the day to the third part of the night. For 2 portions of the day are given to the light, and a third part to the evening. This is that which the Lord commanded you, that you should observe it between the evenings. And it is not permissible to slay it during any period of the light. but during the period bordering on the evening. And let them eat it at the time of the evening, until the third part of the night. And whatever is left over of all its flesh from the third part of the night and onwards, let them burn it with fire. As you can see, we are told that the Passover is to be observed between the evenings. Here is a basic graphic breaking down what Jubilees is saying. 2 portions of the day are given to the light, and a third part is given to the evening. The night is also split up into 3 portions, 2 dark, and the last third is an implied evening as well. From the third part of the day, which is evening, to the third part of the night, which is another evening, the Passover is to be eaten. The Passover cannot be slain during any of the 2 portions of light during the day. It has to be done at the third part of the day, evening or twilight. So what Yahweh is instructing is that you can stay up all night eating the meal until sunrise, but by the time of the rising of the sun, there can't be any leftovers of the Passover lamb remaining. It has to be burned with fire. And they shall eat the flesh that night, roasted with fire, and they shall eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Do not eat any of it raw or boiled at all with water, but rather roasted with fire, both its head and its legs, along with its entrails. And you shall not leave any of it over until morning, but whatever is left of it until morning, you shall burn with fire. The Passover must be roasted with fire. I believe that a stove is also acceptable, as long as the meat is really cooked through. For obvious reasons, it cannot be eaten raw, nor can it be boiled at all with water. Again, if you can, be sure to burn the remainder of what is left of the animal before the morning sun appears. You have all night to cremate the remainders of the Passover, which should be an easy task. The previous passages are the first mention of eating unleavened bread and bitter herbs as part of the main course. I'll touch on the unleavened bread details shortly. Bitter herbs can be things like parsley, horseradish, coriander, mugwort, chamomile, mint, horehound, and endives. So have some fun with it. Getting back to the Passover lamb or goat, Jubilees 49:13 reads, "And they shall not cook it with water, nor shall they eat it raw, but roast it on the fire. They shall eat it with diligence. Its head with the inwards thereof, and its feet they shall roast with fire, and not break any bone thereof. For of the children of Israel no bone shall be crushed." During both your preparation of the meal and eating the meal itself, be careful not to break any of the bones of the lamb or goat, as it signifies that the bones of the children of Israel will not be crushed. That truth came to fruition as the children of Israel were safely led out of the land of Egypt and into the wilderness by the guiding hand of Yahweh. Exodus 12:46 says, "It shall be eaten in a single house, and you shall not bring forth any of the flesh outside of the house, and you shall not break any bone of it." Once the Passover is cooked, eat the meat inside of your dwellings and do not bring any of it out until it's time to be burned up. Again, keep all the bones intact. Now I'm going to move on to some of the specific instructions that the children of Israel were expected to adhere to. This was Israel's first Passover event, and because of the circumstance involving the death angel that Yahweh would send through Egypt as a form of judgment, Yahweh would pass over all the Israelites who faithfully listened to his instructions of safety and well-being. And this was a one-off event, never to be repeated again. Exodus 12:7. "Moreover, they shall take some of the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts and on the lintel of the houses in which they eat it." Once the Passover was slaughtered, some of the blood was used as a signal that the house upon which the blood was smeared was a faithful house and was to be passed over by Yahweh's death angel. I know that some people like to have a tradition that includes mimicking this detail in Exodus, which is completely fine, but it wasn't an applicable commandment for the Israelites once they left Egypt and continued celebrating this event years after. Exodus 12:11-13 says, "Now you shall eat it in this manner, with your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. And you shall eat it in haste. It is the Passover of Yahweh. And I will go through the land of Egypt on that night, and will strike down all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast. And against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgments. I am Yahweh. And the blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are. And I will see the blood, and I will pass over you. And there shall be no plague among you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. Again, the aforementioned details only pertain to those very specific circumstances within the Exodus event. The Israelites would no longer have to do these time and location specific instructions moving forward. Yahweh was setting up all the parts and moving all the pieces for his people to get out of Dodge in haste. Jubilees further states, "And all Israel was eating the flesh of the Passover lamb, and drinking the wine, and was lauding, and blessing, and giving thanks to the Lord God of their fathers, and was ready to go forth from under the yoke of Egypt, and from the evil bondage." The Passover is a very celebratory event. It involves praising, blessing, and giving thanks to Yahweh for his provision and caretaking. If you're a wine drinker, be merry and responsible. I'll be elaborating more on this specific passage in my video, Do What in Remembrance of Jesus? Be sure to check it out once it's released. Exodus 12:14-20 says, "Now this day will be a memorial to you, and you shall celebrate it as a feast to Yahweh. Throughout your generations, you are to celebrate it as a perpetual statute. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. But on the first day, you shall remove leaven from your houses. For whoever eats anything leavened from the first day until the 7th day, that person shall be cut off from Israel. Now on the first day, there shall be a holy convocation, and on the 7th day, there shall be a holy convocation for you. No work at all shall be done on them, except what must be eaten by every person. That alone may be done by you. You shall also keep the feast of unleavened bread, for on this very day I brought your hosts out of the land of Egypt. Therefore, you shall keep this day throughout your generations as a perpetual statute. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at evening, you shall eat unleavened bread, until the 21st day of the month at evening. 7 days there shall be no leaven found in your houses. For whoever eats what is leavened, that person shall be cut off from the congregation of Israel, whether he is a sojourner or a native of the land. You shall not eat anything leavened. In all your places of habitation you shall eat unleavened bread." Both Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread were colloquially referred to in synonymous fashion. If you said you were keeping Passover, people understood that you meant you were also keeping unleavened bread. If you said you were celebrating unleavened bread, people knew that you were also celebrating the Passover. We see this truth being fleshed out in a couple of New Testament passages I'll be getting to in this video. The instructions for the keeping of unleavened bread are as follows. On the first day of unleavened bread, you are to rid your household of any leavening agents, such as yeast and sourdough starter. Not only are you to remove leaven from your homes, but you are instructed not to eat anything leavened in or outside of your homes for the 7-day duration of the feast week. What you are instructed to eat is unleavened bread for each of the 7 days, which includes eating unleavened bread with the Passover on the night that the Passover is slaughtered and cooked. You're not to work on the first day of unleavened bread, as well as the 7th day of unleavened bread. They're likened to Sabbaths and should be treated as such. You're also instructed, if it's attainable for your circumstances, to gather with other believers who are also celebrating this feast on these 2 Sabbath days. The only work that can be done on these 2 Sabbath days is in relation to your meal preparations. Don't forget to celebrate. Exodus 13:6-10 says, "For 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day there shall be a feast to Yahweh. Unleavened bread shall be eaten throughout the 7 days, and nothing leavened shall be seen among you, nor shall any leaven be seen among you in all your borders. And you shall tell your son on that day, saying, It is because of what Yahweh did for me when I came out of Egypt. And it will be as a sign to you on your hand and as a memorial between your eyes, that the law of Yahweh may be in your mouth. For with a strong hand Yahweh brought you out of Egypt. Therefore you shall keep this statute at its appointed time from year to year." Yahweh's feast days are codified into his law. I don't know about you, but I think that's incredibly groovy. He wants us to rest, celebrate, eat, drink, and hang out with other believers as part of his covenant-keeping lifestyle. Now those are rules I can align my life with. Exodus 34:18 says, and you shall keep the feast of unleavened bread. 7 days shall you eat unleavened bread, as I have charged you, at the season in the month of new corn. For in the month of new corn you came out from Egypt. Yahweh reiterates over and over again just exactly how to celebrate his feasts as laid out in Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Leviticus 23:4-8 says, "These are the appointed times of Yahweh, holy convocations which you shall proclaim at the times appointed for them. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at twilight, is the Passover Yahweh. Then on the 15th day of the same month, there is the feast of unleavened bread to Yahweh. For 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. On the first day you shall have a holy convocation. You shall not do any laborious work. But for 7 days you shall bring near an offering by fire to Yahweh. On the 7th day is a holy convocation. You shall not do any laborious work." The only difference in this passage is that for the 7 days of the feast, the Israelites were to bring near an offering by fire to Yahweh. Because there is currently no standing tabernacle or temple today, or active priesthood, aside from Yeshua's up in the temple above, we as believers simply cannot perform this part of the feast. This truth doesn't nullify the rest of the instructions that we absolutely can and should participate in. Let's check out Leviticus 23:5 in the Brenton Septuagint for a second look. "In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, between the evening times, is the Lord's Passover." The Septuagint words the observance of Passover similarly to what we read back in Jubilees 49, verses 10-12. Between the evening times. Remember, from the third part of the day at sunset to the third part of night at sunrise. This segment of time is considered to be between the evenings. Numbers 28:16-25 says, "Then on the 14th day of the first month shall be the Passover of Yahweh, and on the 15th day of this month shall be a feast. Unleavened bread shall be eaten for 7 days. On the first day shall be a holy convocation. You shall do no laborious work. Now on the 7th day you shall have a holy convocation. You shall do no laborious work." Again, we have Yahweh reminding his people about the details of the days he set apart for his covenant people. When we move ahead to the next book in line, the book of Deuteronomy, we can see Moses reminding Israel once again about the particulars surrounding the Passover. This time, he adds where Israel is to celebrate these feasts to Yahweh in the future, as they were positioned to enter into the land of Canaan at that juncture, for the purpose of taking back the land of their forefather, Shem, a land where Yahweh declared that he would put his authority and name. Deuteronomy 16:1-8 says, "Keep the month of Aviv, and celebrate the Passover to Yahweh your God. For in the month of Aviv, Yahweh your God brought you out of Egypt by night. And you shall sacrifice the Passover to Yahweh your God from the flock and the herd in the place where Yahweh chooses for his name to dwell. You shall not eat leavened bread with it. 7 days you shall eat with it unleavened bread, the bread of affliction, for you came out of the land of Egypt in haste, so that you may remember the day when you came out of the land of Egypt all the days of your life. For 7 days no leaven shall be seen with you in all your territory, and none of the flesh which you sacrifice on the evening of the first day shall remain overnight until morning. You are not allowed to sacrifice the Passover in any of your gates of the towns which Yahweh your God is giving you, but at the place where Yahweh your God chooses for his name to dwell. There you shall sacrifice the Passover in the evening at sunset, at the appointed time that you came out of Egypt. And you shall cook and eat it in the place which Yahweh your God chooses. In the morning you are to return to your tents. 6 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day there shall be a solemn assembly to Yahweh your God. You shall do no work on it." The month of Aviv is referred to as the new month in the Greek Septuagint. That's all it means. As you can see, Moses instructed Israel to continue participating in Passover and unleavened bread in similar fashion to the years they celebrated prior. But the only upgrade and difference is that they would slaughter, cook, and eat the Passover in, quote, the place which Yahweh their God chose. He chose Jerusalem as that place later on in their history. But until that day would come, they were to celebrate it exactly as prescribed earlier. Jubilees 49:18-21 says, And when the children of Israel come into the land which they are to possess, into the land of Canaan, and set up the tabernacle of the Lord in the midst of the land, in one of their tribes, until the sanctuary of the Lord has been built in the land, let them come and celebrate the Passover in the midst of the tabernacle of the Lord, and let them slay it before the Lord from year to year. And in the days when the house has been built in the name of the Lord, in the land of their inheritance, they shall go there and slay the Passover in the evening, at sunset, at the third part of the day. And they shall offer its blood on the threshold of the altar, and shall place its fat on the fire which is upon the altar. And they shall eat its flesh roasted with fire in the court of the house, which has been sanctified in the name of the Lord. And they may not celebrate the Passover in their cities, nor in any place save before the tabernacle of the Lord, or before his house, where his name has dwelt. And they shall not go astray from the Lord. Jubilees has a way of always adding that much needed bit of detail to the narrative. Because the ability to participate in said details was removed when Jerusalem was destroyed back in 70 AD, we post-first century folk have been back to memorializing the Passover in our own homes, all across the earth where we have been scattered. One day, we will enjoy the Passover in the great city of our God and King, when Yahweh sends his Son to the earth, and they set up their eternal house in the middle of the land of Shem on the day of the Lord. As we memorialize the Passover, let's reflect on Yahweh's grace and mercy via the Exodus. Let's be reminded of the bondage our brothers and sisters were released from. Let's meditate on the parallels related to our own sin and bondage today. Finally, let's set our countenance towards the day when we will all be united under one glorious roof, celebrating the Passover for eternity to come as immortal sons of God. Blessings.